I mean, it's my second time I went there. I think it's by the way, the whole thing about going to Cannes, I think it's a compounding game. The more you go, the more you meet people, the same people go there, you build relationships, etc. But I think what's interesting about how, from my knowledge of what I've seen, it started off being a very creative based event, then became like a very ad agency kind of based event. Started bringing some really great, amazing pieces of work, by the way. And then ad tech is very, very prominent. A lot of people have ad tech businesses who are out there, which is great as well. And then I think necessarily like it's become this kind of like bit of entertainment's involved as well. And of course, in the world of advertising, content creators are now part of the mix. Whether that's working with big celebrity stage content creators or just ones who are coming through the surface, still getting millions of views on short and long form, but they have to be part of the conversation. Especially where the attention is, where their audiences are, YouTube, long form, especially TikTok, Instagram. I don't have to go into that, but you know where that attention is. So the presence of content creators this year was significantly bigger than last year and the year before. There was a lot of creators that I just bumped into, and as well management firms like myself being there with their talent and just discussing more about that world and kind of the creators being involved with brands and how they operate. Do I think there's a few things that need to be worked on in terms of how they incorporate and discussions being done? Yes, I think there has to be more in depth of how to work with talent and how good campaigns and partnerships work. But that's kind of like the creator economy side. And of course, I'm not going to say this and go into too much detail, but AI was obviously discussed everywhere, which is part of the big conversation, but I think in a positive way in terms of working with it for creative and business and then tech ad sales and all these things, not it's us versus AI. But that was Cannes as a whole in my view.
Really interesting. Talk to me about the creators, right? I know that last year I was seeing on the feed that they felt underrepresented, but part of the conversation. You're saying this year, actually, there's been a shift to we are now here and we are being represented well. Is that something that you saw?
Yeah, I think, examples are, I went on Digital Voices as an agency to work with. Shout out to Jenny and the team. And they had a yacht this year that they just had on the side, and they went out a few times and hosted talks.
Love it.
Like that wouldn't happen 3 years ago.
It's just one of the few places in the world that you can just have a like huge event and go out on a yacht. Like just vibes.
It's literally vibes. But like that presence there of having talks, and they had like big brands there discussing in the creator economy and having talent discussing. That wouldn't happen 3 years ago, and that's happened more. The talks that happen, Meta did a few with big talent just discussing what part of Meta they like to use. Is it more Instagram Reels, classic? Is it stories? Yep, as well. And that was being more discussed. I do think, as I said, there's a lot to be worked on. I think the presence is there, but I think there's a little bit of disconnect in terms of there's these brands and ad agencies there, and then ad tech obviously sits there and is a bit like, where do I go with this? Like, do I hang out with these guys or these guys? I think there needs to be a bigger conversation, as I said earlier, and I pitched this to Cannes when I did a private roundtable last year, is sitting down and discussing with, let's say, our example I told you on the podcast episode, Airbnb and Key and KB, and having the agency and Airbnb together, who we both worked with as a collaborative group, to do the campaign where they released the Edna House in LA. And that got 140 million organic views. Amazing. Loved it. But like the discussion of the process of how it was done, for example, was it a campaign done in a way of let's release the house and then think of social? No, it was more of we're going to release this house and what's the social strategy behind it? And then into that, we're working with Kian, discussing the creative in more depth, and there was some back and forth. And I think that's important to share the back and forth, because I think some people may think, who don't know the creator economy working with talent as well, is they just think they give brief to talent and talent goes, okay, and then they go make the video. And then they come back and go, do you like it? And they go, yeah, there's some changes. And they go away and they come back. Like, some deals can happen like that, but these big ones that have worked so effectively for a brand, like let's talk about them, like how they're done. So I think that's the missing piece there.
That's really interesting. Why do you think that missing piece still exists? And is it because the economy is not mature enough, or is it because there is still a lack of representation at events like this?
I think the latter, in terms of the representation of that part of the industry, is not like, it's not here. It's got better, but I think it needs to just improve. And I think it's the bringing together traditional advertising and advertisers and the career economy And once again, not going, we're separate. I think remember one of the questions you asked me on the podcast was, Chris, do you feel like there's a bit of tension between like the creator economy and then? I said, no, there is still a positive vibe between them, but I think it needs to be kind of interlocked and like, let's talk about it together, how it does work effectively. I think the conversation with talent is about, let's get a talent and talk about why you love Meta. Still important, but why don't we talk about why Meta really worked for a brand working with this talent or this creator and how we made that happen and why brands should be advertising on Meta more. Like that's how I'd do it if I was Meta. I think it just takes time. But as I said, last year it was a smaller presence. This year was bigger. My expectations next year will elevate. And